Ambassador Bolton, do you think Mike Pence would actually testify if asked to do so?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances, and there are ways to do this and ways not to do it. So I think you'd have to see what the committee has in mind. If they wanted to have not testimony, not a deposition, not raising his right hand, but a conversation with the vice president, not in public view, that may be a different story. It really depends on whether the committee wants information or whether it wants publicity.
Speaking of testifying, you tweeted about Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney's loss. You said that her loss, quote, diminishes the Republican Party. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to some criticism that went your way from former Nixon White House counsel John Dean. He said, quote, and John, had you acted, speaking to you, John Bolton, had you acted as she did and testified at Trump's first impeachment trial, you might have swayed the Senate GOP to remove him and we'd be done with him. You'd have made yourself presidential timber like she is. And then Dean goes on to personally insult you. But moving past that insult, if you could address the substance of his criticism, what do you think?
It would have made no difference. The people who led the impeachment effort committed impeachment malpractice from the beginning. They drove this thing in a way that produced an entirely predictable result. And by doing it, they made the situation worse. They made no effort whatever to broaden the support for the impeachment in many, many ways. Would take a long time to describe. They were satisfied that Trump had been impeached. Nancy Pelosi says over and over again, he will always be impeached. And they failed to take into account that he was going to be acquitted by the Senate. So the result is they thought, they surely didn't think they could remove him from office, but they thought impeachment would constrain or deter him from further objectionable conduct. But the malpractice of the impeachment effort meant that he was emboldened, empowered by the impeachment. And that kind of failure wasn't going to be alleviated by me or anybody else. It was a fundamental political flaw in the way they went about it.
You referred to Rudy Giuliani as a hand grenade, I believe, during the whole Ukraine scandal that led to the first impeachment. He's testifying before a grand jury. He's a target of the Fulton County District Attorney's criminal probe into the scheme to overturn Georgia's electoral votes. You've been in the Trump orbit. Do you think Giuliani would theoretically be willing to go to prison to protect Donald Trump, given the fact that he cannot be pardoned by him, at least not for a while?
Well, I don't think he wants to go to prison, that's for sure. My guess is his attorney said after the testimony today, about 6 hours worth, that he wasn't going to comment on it, which is interesting. But I suspect it was 6 hours of taking the Fifth Amendment.
Let's turn to Iran. Following a string of planned or actual attacks on Americans outspoken against the government of Iran, including an assassination plot targeting you, an assassination attempt on Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinejad, who we've had on the show, and of course last week's horrific stabbing attack on author Salman Rushdie. I don't know what evidence exists out there, but what do your national security instincts tell you? Are all of these Iran-related threats and actual attacks in such a short period of time, do you think they're related?
Well, I think what you can conclude from all of these, and more that have not been reported and are still subject to being watched and the rest of it, is that the government of Iran feels no danger from the United States. They think they can act with impunity, even as the Biden administration is on its knees trying to get back into the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. They think they can carry out what, in effect, is an act of war against trying to kill citizens of the United States on American soil. I'm not sure there's precedent for this. This isn't just state sponsorship of terrorism. This is state terrorism of an unprecedented level. And I just think it's demeaning to the United States to allow this to happen and still be begging to get back into a nuclear deal the Iranians aren't going to comply with.
Well, beyond not trying to get that nuclear deal restarted, what do you think President Biden should be doing? I mean, It seems likely that the threat against the journalist directly came from Iran. The threat against you directly came from Iran. At the very least, the attack on Salman Rushdie was incited by Iran, which had just reinstated and redeclared the fatwa against Salman Rushdie just days before the attack. They're obviously doing this on purpose, as you note. What should Biden do?
Well, I think they've got to do more than issue statements saying that an attack on American will be met with reprisal. That's obviously insufficient deterrence, and it means waiting until somebody is dispatched. Salman Rushdie was grievously wounded. It's a miracle he's alive. So if we have to wait until the Revolutionary Guards or their agents actually kill somebody before we do anything, then I think the Iranians are going to continue to be encouraged. I think you've got to say to the Iranians, we are walking away from the negotiations over the nuclear deal. You are a thoroughly uncivilized government. We know you're not worth your word on anything, and we're going to take steps to protect Americans and to protect the wider world against your threat, not the nuclear issue over here and the terrorism issue over there. It is the regime itself that's a threat, and we are going to do what we need to do to protect ourselves and our allies.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.